Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. Today, we're going to discuss praying and why prayer is good for us. In Western society, there's definitely been a movement towards being more secular, to move out of traditional religious practice. And that's a debate, I think, in society today, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes we can say it's a good thing. We've outgrown sort of childish stories of myths and Moses splitting the seas in two and helping the Hebrews to escape the Egyptians and stuff like that, and believing in that kind of sort of God that was vengeful when they worshiped the golden calf and stuff like that is kind of silly, and that it's good that humans are moving beyond that. On the other hand, there's also a lot of folks that say we've moved too far away from religion, that when humans don't have a sort of religious grounding, that it can make us a little bit lost, that we don't know how to orient ourselves to our own reality, and it maybe even have a bit of a vulnerability to adopt other ideologies that aren't necessarily religious traditionally, but are kind of new belief systems. So there's a bit of a debate whether it's good or bad, but it is what it is, that we are more secular today than we were, let's say, even 40 to 50 years ago. Particularly in Western society, Christianity was definitely practiced more commonly than it is today. Although we still have quite a few Christians out there, and that's a good thing. And also new, with the change of demographics in the last couple decades, a lot of different practices, Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism are very, not that rare to see in Canadian and Western society. So, what I want to discuss is in terms of what do we know about praying and what its relationship to well being is. And there is a few things that the evidence out there seems to start to point at. That people who generally pray on a daily basis, typically, it's not an absolute rule, but there seems to be some suggestion that daily prayers are beneficial for well being, that people who pray on a daily basis will be more resilient and more able to support their well being in their lives. So that's one thing to consider. Um, that being said, the type of prayer also can be quite influential in terms of the degree to which it impacts well being. So, more repetitive, kind of traditional ceremonial prayers um, don't seem to have as much impact as different types of prayer. And we'll get back to what those are. So, a prayer where you're kind of saying the same thing over and over and over again um, doesn't seem to be quite as effective in terms of supporting well-being. Not that it's hindering. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. If for people that have traditional religious beliefs and you have to pray a certain way every day, um, I think all the power to people. If you feel connected to that, that's great. I'm just trying to share a little bit of my interpretation of what sort of the literature suggests. So that's one type of prayer. We're just kind of orthodox, sort of traditional, repetitive prayer over and over again. Then there's what we can call supplication prayers, when we ask for something from God, or whichever sort of word we use for a deity or higher power, so on. So when we ask for stuff or ask for a situation to be different than it is, like, God, please change this situation. This is awful. Please don't make me go through this, or please help, please help me in changing these circumstances. These are awful circumstances. I can't handle this. Um, that also doesn't seem to be the most effective way to pray in terms of supporting well-being. Again, I'm not trying to make some sort of claim in terms of what's the right way to pray in terms of what God thinks, because I think that's a very different sort of idea. I'm trying to always relate to our well-being in terms of our day-to-day existence. So, what type of prayers are the most effective to support well-being and lessen suffering and support living the good life. So sort of repetitive, traditional stuff, so-so, let's say, it's okay. Supplication prayer, perhaps also not the most effective. When we get into the kind of prayers that seem to have a truly beneficial impact, we can call them pro-social prayers. Prayers that encourage internalizing a pro-social attitude. So a classic example of pro-social prayers is to pray for other people, to pray for people to do well, to wish other people well, to wish that their suffering is lessened and that they can get by whatever the hard thing they're going through, and that they be protected. And so praying for others seems to be quite, and especially doing it on a regular basis, daily basis, seems to be quite a good way to support our well-being. And that's quite logical based on what we've discussed, that, the previous podcast, that when there's too much thinking about me in my head, I tend to be less happy. So when I pray for others, I am deliberately turning my attention away from the me and wishing well to others, which is a natural mechanism to move the me a little bit out of the way and therefore allow a space of well-being to emerge. And then there's also sort of praying for qualities, praying for maybe virtues, you could say. So for example, to pray for courage to be able to face the challenges that are set before me. So it's a very subtle but important distinction between, I'll say in this particular, God, please remove this situation from me, versus God, please give me the courage to face this situation before me. So those subtleties, I believe, are important in terms of how we pray in supporting our well-being. So pro-social prayer and praying for good qualities. I pray that my actions are in alignment with the highest good. Give me the courage to face this. And I have personally found it quite helpful to pray in many different situations. Sometimes I've been in situations where I feel like it's going to be a very challenging encounter with a patient for different reasons. And just, a minute or two of just praying, I pray to do that which is in alignment with the highest good, to have the courage to face this with the best ability that I have. That's my, I'm requesting that, and gently, it's not even necessarily many words, but just almost a quiet feeling of that kind of intention. And it's really helpful because you can feel a little bit more calm and ability to just, okay, I can do this. Almost supports a self-esteem in a way. So those are a bit of the distinctions in the types of prayers. Okay, but one thing to explore here as well is that for folks who aren't leaning towards being religious, who maybe even lean towards being an atheist, or that there's, it's silly, it's, God is dead, in the words of Nietzsche, like that kind of thing, or there is no God. It's all silly stuff that we made up because we were so scared, and now we have science, and science has replaced God, and therefore praying is a silly thing. And so, okay, and I can kind of empathize with that position. There's been it's been a cultural shift. A lot of people who don't feel that connection to something greater. But I fundamentally do believe that nurturing a sense of connection with something greater than ourselves is absolutely essential to supporting our well-being in a fundamentally deep and meaningful way. So then it's like, okay, but even if you don't really lean religious at all, like it's just not your thing, and any concept of a God that would, chastise the Jews for worshiping the calf when Moses went up the mountain and got upset, like I can understand that. Like I don't really connect with that kind of concept of a God that just gets a temper tantrum and stuff like that. So I get that, why people moved away from that. And I can also understand the appeal of science and what science has done for our understanding of truth and reality. But even if we follow science really deeply down, the rabbit hole, if you will. It points to the fact, and I call it a fact, and I would stand by the fact that what underlies reality, the source of our existence, of the source of the functioning of the universe, the source of the functioning of biology, is a vast, incredible intelligence. An intelligence so grand that we cannot even come close to comprehending. I mean, we like to think like we know stuff as humans sometimes. We know our stuff. We're really advanced. And we are doing amazing things. I'm also totally blown away by what humans can do. But that doesn't mean we know that much either. And so, for example, if we take one basic yeast cell, a basic yeast cell, that's the most simple cell we know of in biology today, in the current sort of biosphere. Well, one basic yeast cell has so many functions occurring in perfect coordination at every second of its existence in order to be alive. And so if we take the best supercomputer out there, the best, I think it's like a quintillion, they call flops, floating point operations per second. The best, supercomputer will have a quintillion, I think it's like 15 zeros or something ridiculous per second. That many functions per second is what some of our best computers are doing. That's an incredible feat, and I'm super proud that our species can do that. But that is eclipsed, and I mean eclipsed by multiple magnitudes of order by what one cell is doing in order to exist, and the sharing of information, metabolism, things going through in and out of the cell wall, and all these proteins that will merge and separate and reconnect in a different way, something called interactomes. That is a new frontier of biology. There are untold amounts of interactomes. I mean, we're talking about the number one with literally billions of zeros. Like these numbers that our brains can't even wrap their heads around are occurring within one little tiny cell. And like your body and this body is something like 60 trillion cells. So it is incredible complexity that makes biology possible. And this idea that it was random and these chemicals bounced together in the early prebiotic earth and it's just kind of happened randomly, and it's science tells us that there's no God, and it just kind of happened by itself and it's all random. It's like, I don't think so. I really think that that's almost, it's kind of trying to convince ourselves of what is staring us in the face. Now I can understand that we're not necessarily believing in an entity, like a thing, a person up in the sky. I get that. But there's something going on. There's something incredible going on, an incredible intelligence that connects us all. And so when we talk about the analogy of oneness with the ocean and the wave, it's nice that, when we start to see ourselves, we talked about this a lot, the wave needs to, it's really helpful for the well-being when the wave starts to feel itself not as this separate little wave that's very temporary and therefore the world is scary, but feels the ocean, feels the ocean underneath it. But the ocean isn't just what connects us. We're not just the ocean. The ocean, analogously, speaking metaphorically, the ocean is also incredibly intelligent. When we think about something intelligent, an intelligent person, we all like an intelligent person because they're high functioning. They function well. They create cool stuff that works well, or whatever, And the functioning of the universe and the way stars form and solar systems form, and the way biology exists, it's the highest functioning thing ever that we that just blows things out of the water. And to say that comes from a certain randomness, it's all random. It just happened. We just got lucky. We rolled the dice. It's just like, I don't know what people are talking about when they go in that direction. Something incredibly intelligent is behind all that. And it's not even a thing like a person, but a field of something. The ocean, it's not like the ocean's a person. I'm the wave and the person's the ocean. And no, we're all connected. There's no separation. Okay. It's like we're extensions of that. So prayer that's what to me prayer is. It's an alignment. It's an invitation for the higher intelligence, the greater power for us to align ourselves with that, to summon that into our hearts, into our minds, um, to invite something that's much greater than my own mind. Like my intelligence of my very limited brain is isn't sufficient on its own to meet the challenges of life. And that's the idea of prayer, is it's sort of a humbling act, like, to request to align ourselves with a greater intelligence, with a greater power. And that kind of thing done on a daily basis for sure is supportive to well-being and allows us to meet the challenges that we must face, allows us to be resilient and even be joyous. I mean, have you ever tried to pray in a meeting? It's kind of funny. It's kind of a good feeling. Like, you're in a meeting at work and there's like 10 people around the table and there's a discussion. And then all of a sudden it's like, you don't have to, it's not use the word God, but like, I pray for these people that they have a good day, that they have, that they meet their day well, and that they have, you know, courage to meet their own challenges. And I hope that I'm wishing them well. And I pray for these people. And I pray to God, thank you, God, for this moment that we're all together. Like, and then it's like, you can still actually be participating in the meeting and be focused and thinking straight and be a good contributor. But just the shift of energy of the sensation in the chest that can occur where it's just like, oh, this meeting is just like oh my God, I got to get out of this meeting, towards like just feeling a sense of elevation where, like a lightheartedness, and you're just seeing the meeting and it's, feels good. So praying, it doesn't need to be this ceremonial, stern, like I must pray, I must pray. It's praying is an invitation. It's an invitation to connect with this mysterious high intelligence that is, pervasive in our reality, that it's just so evident in our face that we don't even see it. It's right in front of our nose. So, my friends, maybe we can pray for one another. Maybe we can pray for courage to face our challenges, and maybe we can pray for well-being. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.